Well, that concludes the afternoon session here at the Principled Entrepreneurship Conference, which also brings to a close all of the panels for today. This has been a fairly remarkable conference looking at the life and work of Michael Novak, but also the influence of Novak in, really, I think, helping us all to understand the importance of democratic capitalism. To continue our conversation and to sort of put a capstone to the conversation today, I'm joined by Mary Eberstadt. Mary, you are a noted author, a scholar, in so many ways, one of the great commentators, I think, on where we are today in culture. What was your take on this conference, but also where you think this conference needs to help us go?
Well, thank you, Matthew. I think it was incredibly exciting today because you can see people coming from different orbits trying to figure out, first of all, what is new about our times?
Yeah.
And second, what do we do about that? A lot of the conference was, of course, shaped by the thought of the late Michael Novak, who was a great mentor, great thinker, great community builder. And I think what we were seeing today is an understanding that the challenges of his time are not the same things we are facing now. So I could see consensus coalescing around the idea that the family, for example, is uniquely in trouble and that this is having massive effects on our society. Also that the churches that are in decline are also having negative effects on our society. I think people here agreed that a proper understanding of human anthropology acknowledges what's critical about a transcendental realm, and that we don't function well as individuals or as citizens without faith and family. And it's very exciting to see so many engaged minds forging a new consensus about at least what the problem is out there, if not always about how to address it.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of discussion today about the pillars that Michael Novak relied on for democratic capitalism, the idea of a democratic polity, the idea of a market system, but then that key component of a moral culture. You seem to be hitting exactly on that theme of the moral culture and how finding the common good, but then also things like subsidiarity. But the moral aspect of that is really underestimated today, isn't it?
The point about the moral culture and talking about the moral culture is not to make people feel bad. We are all affected by the same trends in modern society. The point is instead a new one, and that is to acknowledge that something about the way we are living is making many people miserable. If you look at, for example, the practitioners of identity politics and how they talk about their role in the world, you see a lot of rage and sadness and loss behind their language, and often in their language. And so one of the things I think we're trying to address is the fact that we have been othered in this culture.
Right.
We have been told we're the oppressors, or we've got things wrong, or we are the backward religious believers. But instead, at the conference today, there was a lot of acknowledgement about the sad shape that people are in who are trying to live without robust families, who are trying to live without God, who are not getting married as young people, not having children. If the sense of the conference is correct, and one of the most important facts about our society is its loneliness and its atomization, then the idea that young people should not have children is exactly the wrong recipe. And that's why it's important to get at the roots of these things, I think, because human happiness and flourishing depends on them.
Right. There's also conversation, I know that it's sort of a flashpoint about whether we should use terms like woke capitalism or even the word woke at all to embrace some of their language. Even capitalism, that was sort of discounted today too. What is some of the language that we should use, in your view, in confronting this in order to be able to articulate our position rather than simply embracing their terms?
I think it is important not to buy into language that implicitly repudiates Christian anthropology. And so I would also be wary of that word woke. We all know what we mean by it, but it's not a term that unpacks a lot for us. The way I try to approach these things is to say, I hear the cries of these people who think they are victims, and I think they are victims too. I think we all do, but they are not victims of the abstractions that they're taught in their schools. They're not victims of heteronormativity or the gender binary or other things, intersectionality, that they are taught to believe in. No, their problems are much more immediate, and they are shared by many other people in this society. The problems are that for 60 years plus, there's been an unraveling of the family and of the churches. Nobody intended for this to happen. Some people cheered it on.
Right.
But now we are seeing the compounded effects of alienation and atomization on a scale that really is unique in human history, I believe.
Yeah.
So, in other words, let's start with acknowledging their point. They are indeed victims, but they are not victims of the politicized things that they're told they are.
Right. So what's the solution?
To speak plainly, to engage where we can engage. I gave one example today. Since the Dobbs decision, we know there will be more babies in America. There will be a need for more charities directed at those babies and their mothers and the fathers of those babies. And I think that's a place where, once we have these institutions, we should reach out to people who are not pro-life, to the many young women especially who form the backbone of the pro-abortion movement, and say, look, we might not agree about everything, but could we agree that helping mothers and children is a good thing? And reach out and ask them to volunteer their time and to volunteer their resources to help other people in society who are worse off than they are. I think that's one example of how we can make common cause in a way that we need to get to.
Right. One of the issues that's sometimes raised about trying to reach the common good is that we've lost sort of a common vocabulary in how we even talk to each other. Is there any truth to that in your view?
Yes, Matthew, I think there's truth in that. I think also there is truth in the fact that living outside of families, as many people do, has robbed them of some basic human knowledge. So, for example, I do believe that the pro-abortion movement would be much weaker than it is if everybody in it had direct experience of babies and toddlers. Basic things like that. We have to realize we live in a society now where many young women and young men will grow up without having held a baby, without knowing what it's like to read a storybook to a toddler. These might sound like little things, but these are the things that humanize us.
Yes.
And so I think recentering the conversation on that, on who really is the smaller and weaker party in this, namely small children, babies, or at the other end of life, the elderly, and trying to get some common way of approaching them in a charitable spirit, I think we could make a lot of headway there.
What is the prudent role of the state in that process?
Well, that's a great question. There is certainly room for experimentation with family policies, with policies that make it easier for families to form, that benefit people who are married, because all the social science shows that people who get married and stay married tend to be productive citizens in society and to give back because their resources are not compromised by split-ups and things like that. So I think there's a lot of creative room there. The question is what kind of administration will get behind it, and I'm hoping we get the answer to that in a couple of years.
Yeah. So from this conference, what, in your view, should be the next steps for the concept of principled entrepreneurship? What is your hope for the CEOs and leaders at this conference, or people who are watching streaming?
We've talked a lot about what an enlightened philanthropist should do. And obviously pouring resources into the counterculture, whether it is Christian groups on campuses or alternative schools, the homeschooling networks, etc. Obviously, all of that is to the good. Once more, looking for common cause over issues where we disagree but can agree that charity is needed by vulnerable people. It's another place. I hope also that we've energized people to understand that it's not okay to deliver ideological attacks on Christian charities.
Right.
It's not okay to think that any crucifix is a red flag and then to throw lawsuit after lawsuit trying to shut down Catholic charities or other Christian charities. I think we can push back on that, and the feeling in the room today was energetic. It was not one of defeat, it was one of hope and reaching basic agreement on what the problems are in a way that I don't think we've had agreement for a long time. So again, it was very exciting.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but Mary Eberstadt, it's always a joy to spend time with you.
Thank you, Matthew. Great to be here.
Well, that brings to a close our coverage of the 2022 Principled Entrepreneurship Conference here in New York City. I'm Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor for EWTN News. This has been brought by the Napa Institute and the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America. You can continue streaming and you can find the videos elsewhere. Please say a prayer for everyone who's participating. Say a prayer especially for the Bush School and also for the Napa Institute. It has been a privilege to be with you today. And until next time, please take care and God bless.